What's going on, guys? I'm doing another car talk video. I kind of wanted to go a little more in depth in gardening methods. I was trying to think about what to talk about because I like doing these kind of videos where I'm just kind of talking about different subjects, and there are subjects I would like to talk about that I'm not going to because it's just not really what this channel's about, at least not at this point. But yeah, I kind of decided to do go a little bit more in depth in gardening methods, because you always see people say that this method's the best, that method's the best. So I want to start off the video saying that, of course, this is my opinion on the matter, and I'm not an expert gardener, so you know, I don't necessarily do it the best way, but this is what I've learned and what I like to do at the time. There are so many different methods that are out there. So the other thing I want to say is that experiment with them. Experiment with the different methods and find something that you like. Find something that's going to keep you gardening. Find something that seems to work well in your area, or whatever. It could just be it worked well in your yard. You know, it doesn't have to be, there's no set in stone method, is what I'm trying to say. So this is my opinion on the matter, and you know, there are so many different methods that you can try. Find something that you like. Find something that keeps you out there and keeps you gardening, and stick with it. So obviously the most obvious method is just plant straight into the ground, but that, you know, there are a lot of variables with that, because it depends on your soil. You know, it depends on your soil type, and it depends on the organic matter and the nutrients in your soil. Being from Florida, my soil is primarily sand, and it's very high in phosphorus. So I have to take stuff like that into account. If you're from like Georgia, especially like northern Georgia, Tennessee, that area, your soil is going to be very full of clay. And the perfect soil is a mixture of both. You know, you need the perfect mixture, the perfect ratio of clay and sand, and that's how you get loam. But I don't know if there really is a perfect ratio anywhere. There's always something that's a little bit out of balance. But I know here I could add clay to my soil to kind of build up the loam a little bit, but I don't fool with it. I plant directly into the sand, and because my soil is not 100% sand, but it's very sandy. So if you're going to do direct planting, like just in the ground direct, so planting, you know, that sort of thing, I would highly recommend, and I've mentioned it before, but I highly recommend getting a soil analysis done. And you have to go online and search for where you would do that. For me, it's sending it off to University of Florida to get them, which is what I did. I sent it off to the main branch in Gainesville, where they are, and they did an analysis, sent me back the results, and I printed it off, and I have it in my house. That way I can look and analyze what I need to do, which I've done. You know, I analyzed what I need to, because my soil is a little bit acidic, so I needed to add, they recommended me adding some lime, and my soil is high in phosphorus, so I don't need to add any phosphorus. and my soil is high, it needs nitrogen and potassium, which I look for fertilizers that are high in that. So I highly recommend doing that if you're going to plant directly into the ground. Look up in your area where you need to send a sample off to. If it's your local extension office or whatever, send it off to that. Get the sample done. It's not that expensive, and it's not hard. Get the sample in so you can see what you need to tailor in your soil in order to make it in order to increase your yields and make healthier plants and stuff like that. So that's the most obvious thing. Just plant directly into the ground, and that's what I have started doing, and that's what I have found that I would rather do as opposed to any of the other methods I've tried. But the I think most popular way of growing is in raised beds, and to do that you can make them. I think the higher the beds, the better, but they don't have to be super high. You can use wood and make raised beds. You can use cinder block. You can use I've seen metal, almost like metal troughs used. If you go on I think his name is Mark, Self-Sufficient Me, he's in Australia, so you have to take that into account with your climate. His climate and my climate it'd be, I guess, some similarities, but some very big differences as well. But he uses big metal, almost looks like troughs, and they're very tall, and I know in some of his planters, I don't know about all of them, he uses kind of a hugelkultur method, which that's another gardening method, but so he doesn't have to put as much soil in there. But yeah, raised beds, the perk that they say about raised beds is that you're not dealing with your poor soil conditions. You're bringing in soil, whether you're going to a big box store like Home Depot, Ace Hardware, a local garden center, I don't know, and you're bringing in soil, and it's healthier, it's loamier, it's not, the ratios are where they're supposed to be, and that sort of thing. So and it's supposed to, depending on how you do it, it can help with pests and things like that. I have done raised garden beds and I've had success with them, but for me, I just found that the maintenance around them was not something I was going to keep up with like I should, so I stopped doing it. And there are various different ways to do raised garden beds. You can do 4x4 square, 5x5 square. I did a long, narrow rectangle one time, and I grew some okra and stuff like that in it. And the one thing I would recommend, though, is don't make it so wide that you can't reach across. You should be able to reach standing on any side of the bed. You should be able to reach the center. You don't want to have it so wide, like an 8x8 raised bed, and now I can't reach into the center, But there's that. You can make keyhole gardens. You can make mandala gardens, and those are all forms of raised garden beds, and they all work. They all have their ups and downs. I quit doing it because I don't want to bring in soil, and I don't want to maintain the grass and the weeds around the bed. And call me lazy if you want to, but that's just me. And then there's also container gardening, which is, I guess, raised beds maybe could be seen as a container garden, but container garden is more of like it's completely in a container. It's not, there's no bottom that where the roots can get out or whatever. Container gardening is really, really good if you have a limited space. And again, you're controlling the soil condition, and you can make some really healthy soil. I've seen blends and stuff like that you can make with fertilizers and soil and stuff like that, like potting soil in container gardens. And some plants do really well in container gardens. I've successfully grown cherry tomatoes, pear tomatoes. I've successfully grown lettuce, and I've successfully grown strawberries in containers. And it's not a bad idea. It's really good if you're living in an apartment or something and you have a balcony that gets enough sun. Just get you a bunch of containers and have you a little mini garden out on your balcony, and then you don't have to worry about the space to plant and stuff like that. You can just use containers. And there are books out there. I personally read I think it's called the Container Gardener's Bible or something like that, just because I was interested in the idea. And they have all sorts of ways you can lay out an individual container to grow more than one crop in an individual container. Now, you need to have a very large container to do that, and you need to have a very large container if you're going to be growing very large crops. It is possible to grow a lot of things in containers. It all depends on the size of the crop. The size of the container. I know in that book they talk about growing things. I think they've talked about growing like corn and stuff in a container. You've got to have a very, very big container. And if you're planting more than one thing in a container, you really need to study up on companion planting, because you don't want to plant the wrong things next to each other. So container gardening is not a bad method. There again, you have to buy the equipment. You got to bring in the soil. You got to do all that sort of stuff. But it is it's an option, especially if you need to save space. And it works. It does work. I think personally, if you're going to do container gardening, sticking with smaller plants will help you, because it's less hassle, less maintenance. Unless you can find like dwarf varieties. You can also grow certain fruit trees and plant in containers. There are dwarf varieties of fruit trees, or you can just keep depending on the fruit, you can keep the tree cut back, shorter and smaller, and still have fruit. And another a raised bed method that I forgot to mention is called the square foot garden method. And you build a raised bed, and I don't know the exact details to this, so because I think the raised bed has to be a certain area, and you get a raised bed and you lay out either with lattice or with string or something like that. You make a grid on top of it, and each square is a 1 inch by 1 inch square. If I'm saying that right, I don't think it's 1 foot by 1 foot. Again, like I said, do more research on this. I'm just kind of giving you the method ideas. But each square, you plant different things in each square. And so you have, in one raised bed, you have a whole bunch of different things that you're growing in each of these squares. And some people swear by this. And again, it's very good to do if you have limited space. You can cram a bunch in there and get a lot of produce from a small area. Now, with certain types of container gardening, with square foot gardening, with most of your raised bed gardening, all of these are methods called biointensive, which means that you have a whole lot of life kind of squeezed in a small space. And if you have the ability, when you do that, it requires a lot of water. If you have that availability, then that's fine. If you don't, you're going to struggle, because when you have all these plants and root spaces next to each other really close, and they're all trying to compete for water, nutrients, soil space, that sort of stuff, you've got to continuously feed it and water it to keep it happy. With my garden, planting it in the ground, I've spaced mine out more so that I am getting I don't have to water it as much, because the roots have more room to run down and find water and find nutrients and stuff like that. That's what I like. But if you've got the means to do it, then raised beds are not a bad thing. And you can grow pretty much anything you want in it. And square foot gardening, along with container gardening, if you have a small space like a balcony or something like that, I would look into that. That way you can grow quite a bit in your very, very confined space. Because I think a lot of people, they live in the city or something, and they want to get into, they want to just, even if it's just growing a tomato plant or something, growing some herbs or something, they feel like, I don't know if I can do it because I just have this little balcony, I don't have a lot of space, or I have this really tiny yard, I don't have the space, I live with an HOA, I can't dig up my yard and plant. Well, then do this. And it can be a way to still get homegrown herbs or produce or whatever, and in a very small space. Another method is there's I think it's got different names to kind of describe the same thing. The no-till or no-dig method is also called lasagna gardening. Basically, you have a space, and some people don't even bust up the ground, like they don't even fork the grass at all, they just leave it as is, and they'll put down you'll bring in some soil, you'll bring in some newspaper or cardboard, you'll bring in some compost, you'll bring in some leaves, you'll bring in all this sort of stuff, and put it and stack it up. And you got to stack it pretty good. You want a very thick layer of this stuff underneath, and then you can on top put another layer of newspaper or cardboard or a weed cloth or something like that on top of that, and then you plant into that. And when you dig it out, you put whatever plant you want in there, and then you fill it with soil and compost. And some people just use compost, they don't even use soil, they fill the hole up with compost. And all the stuff underneath, you have this whole layer of stuff, all the stuff underneath starts to break down, and as it does, it feeds the plants. Again, it's a good method if you have the means to bring all that stuff in. I know 2 people off the top of my head that do that. Morag Gamble with My Permaculture Life, or Our Permaculture Life, I don't remember exactly. Again, she's in Australia, and she's got a very big garden that she does with this kind of no-dig method, no-till method, lasagna gardening, that sort of thing. And then Charles Dowding in England, well, I won't say England, I think he's in England, but I'll say the UK because I don't know exactly where he is. He does that, and both of them, they have great yields and all this other stuff. Now, they've been doing it for a long time, so they know more about it and that sort of thing. But it's a great method if you have the means to bring in all the materials needed. It builds over time. It's the first year that you do it won't be as good as the second year, won't be as good as the third year, won't be as good as the fourth year, and so on and so forth. because over time all of that material is breaking down, creating fertilizer, and you're adding little bits on. And also the most expensive time is setting it up first, but as you go along, you're just adding a little bit more to keep it keep the organic matter and stuff at the level you need it. But so the longer you do it, the better your yields are going to be. Now again, it needs to be kept moist, and it's somewhat of a biointensive method. Somewhat. You can space it out, so it's not strictly biointensive, but it is somewhat of a biointensive method. Then you've got, of course, your aquaponics and hydroponics, which I've talked about on a previous video, and those are very kind of modern methods, and you have I'm not sure if I'm missing anything. You've got the vertical gardens, which are another modern thing that people are doing. A lot of indoor gardens with that. And a lot of people are saying that, eventually we're going to have to go to indoor gardens for one reason or another. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but and you have, you've got all kinds of different methods as far as hydroponics, like the Kratky method, all different kinds of methods. So what I would do is, and then of course you've got, permaculture versus traditional agriculture. There are, you can mix it. I mean, there's all sorts of different kinds of combinations. What I would recommend is do some research on these different methods and see which methods that what do you like. Some people like me, I've tried container gardening, and I still to a point do some container gardening. I've tried raised beds. I even tried a method called raised row gardening, which is kind of like row gardening mixed with lasagna gardening, and I have found thus far that my favorite thing to do is just put it straight into the ground. And so that's what I'll be sticking with. But do some research on these methods and see what you like. Find out which one you like. If you are interested in raised beds, then go all out, do raised beds. Oh, hugelkultur was another one I was going to mention, and I said something about it, but basically with hugelkultur, I believe it's a German method, and you take dead logs and stuff like that, and I don't know if you bury them at all or if you just put them on the ground, and then over the top of it you kind of do like a lasagna layer, and over time the logs slowly break down and feed the soil. So you can do that within a container or within a raised bed. You can, on the bottom of your raised bed, you can put sticks and logs and stuff like that, and then on top of that put your soil and your compost and stuff, and then you don't have to bring in as much soil, and over time that wood will feed the bed. But do some research, go on and look at it, read some books, figure out what appeals to you the most and what appeals to your situation the most, and stick with it and go after it. You're gonna see various gardeners come out and make videos and books and stuff talking about how this method that they use is the end all be all of gardening methods, and if you don't do it this way, you're stuck in the dark ages, and what are you doing, and blah blah blah. Just ignore that. Find what you like to do, whether it be directly in the ground, containers, raised beds, hydroponics, a mix of everything, whatever, and find what appeals to you, what keeps you in the garden. That's the most important thing, because if you're going to try to force yourself to do something that you really don't enjoy doing, you're going to quit gardening, and that's not what we want. We want you to keep gardening. So that's about it for today. It's a short video. I'm having memory problems again on my phone. I'm going to have to try to figure something out so that I'm not running out of space as much. But anyways, yeah, find what you like and stick with it, and don't listen to the naysayers. Let them, if they think their garden method is the best, good for them. Let them do their garden method. If you like this instead, then good for you. You do that. As long as you're growing, that's what's important. Keep growing. So that's kind of a brief overview of some different methods. If you haven't heard of any of these methods, go online, research it, find you some books on it, and find some videos about people actually doing these methods so you can see it in action, and get out there and get to work. So please comment, please like, share, subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel as much as possible, and that takes care of it today, and I'll be back next week with a new video.